लगभग 2500 साल पुराना एक स्तंभ लगा हुआ है। प्राकृत भाषा में लिखा है, मानवता का कल्याण और सुख सदैव सुनिश्चित किया जाए। यह हम सभी के साथ मिलकर चलने का समय है और इसलिए सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास का मंत्र हम सभी के लिए एक पथ प्रदर्शक बन सकता है।
I want to once again thank Prime Minister Modi for his leadership and his hospitality in hosting the G20. He and I have had substantial discussions about how we're going to continue to strengthen the partnership between India and the United States.
Prime Minister Modi, faithful to its principles, India did its utmost for its presidency of the G20 to serve unity and peace and send across a message.
This year our theme was one world, one family and one future.
Namaste, Jai Hind and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. The world is going gaga over the way we have hosted some of the most powerful nations in the world and also the most contributing nations of the world. 2/3 of the world's GDP was here not so long ago, ladies and gentlemen, and they've all gone happy. There are multiple staggers or multiple layers to the entire G20 year of presidency and the 2 days of the G20 summit. And what everybody is taking away is that India deserves a seat at the table. India is a friend. India has brought nations who are perhaps had acrimony or frosty equations with each other, and they've all come together. And India has found solutions where there only were problems. We are the nation that are emerging as a friend to everyone, a Vishwamitra, with the mantra that the Prime Minister has given of Sabka Saath, which has now become the Vishwa Mantra, ladies and gentlemen, that everybody can be included, everybody can work together, and that's what we need to focus on. Yes, there are a few messages that have gone out, some indications have gone out. There are a few nations who have decided that they are going to go across and perhaps design a new world order for themselves. India is engaging with all of us, all of these nations. But more importantly, Bharat's position, we will talk about vis-a-vis those nations which are encouraging secessionist elements that are pushing drugs into our country, who are indulging in human trafficking and also setting up and running their gangster networks operating from from their soil. They have also been sent a very stern message. It's been a huge, embarrassing G20 for Justin Trudeau, who still is in the national capital. That means in Delhi, ladies and gentlemen, because his flight has got a technical snag and it's an old Airbus that is now coming in to try and ferry him, and he should be on his way out on Tuesday. We'll talk about all of that, but first let's understand why this is perhaps the most action-oriented, most successful G20s ever. And this is the reason why. It's been the most action-oriented G20s, 73 overall outcomes that have come through, 39 annex documents, 112 presidency documents, 2 to 5 times more outcomes than any of the other G20s in the past. That's how significant is the achievement and actionable and aggressive this G20 presidency, year of presidency. There have been outcomes even when G20 has been democratized and taken across the length and breadth of the country via Jan Bhagidari. There was outcome at Jaipur where there was a call to action to help promote MSMEs. In the Deccan, there was a call to action. In Goa, there was a call to action or a outcome on tourism. Plenty of outcomes to share and plenty of outcomes to celebrate here. 112 overall, the most action-oriented, and it's all there. Now the challenge is going to be to, ahead of the virtual session in November, to bring to fruition all that has been agreed upon in that New Delhi declaration. The Vishwamitra with the Vishwa Mantra. That's the theme for this discussion, and let's try and understand why we say it's true. Let's look at it. Some of the most actionable points, and it started right at the top, day one, the introduction speech, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi quoting some of the scriptures. He has gone ahead and talked about the aspect of the Africa Union inside the club. India is a superpower ahead of China now. That's the reaction that's come from the Africa Union, because they made the request when India got the gavel. And there was a promise in Bali by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we will make it happen. And the Africa Union of Nations are now looking at India and saying they are the ones who have made it happen. Then the next aspect, the next important point, where the corridor to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, France, Italy, Germany. So all the way from India, we will be going to Europe, connecting via rail, sea, roads, and this economic corridor at zero cost. But nations who would have never agreed to it in the past are now doing it, and we are given to understand that the Italian Prime Minister, testament to human endeavor and unity, that's the reaction that has come forth at this corridor to counter China's BRI. It's a game-changing regional investment. That's what nations are saying. That's and look at that signature handshake. A nation that termed, or a president who termed the Crown Prince a pariah, he's actually shaking hands with him, and in the center it's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What did Saudi Arabia say? Saudi said enhancing eco-connectivity and a global economy. These were the reactions that came from nations who are part of this economic corridor, which will be at zero cost to Bharat, ladies and gentlemen. The Global Biofuels Alliance. India has said it's a watershed moment in the quest for clean energy. Brazil, which actually mooted this, is said it will confront climate issue with responsibility. E20 is the solution. We are already at 11.7% ethanol in our petrol. We are trying to move towards 20% ethanol. And Union Minister Nitin Gadkari, while speaking with us here, very clearly said how that's going to benefit so many people across so many avenues. The future is of biofuels. Meanwhile, 100% consensus on all issues. It's a milestone. It's a milestone for India's chairmanship. That's how it's been accorded. US has called it a milestone for India's chairmanship. Brazil saying Delhi Declaration is a win for Bharat. And it's a win for everyone, because there are no footnotes. There are no dissenting words. Everything was agreed upon, even the 8 paragraphs on geopolitics and the 3 paragraphs which were alluding to the Ukraine war. Softer language on the Ukraine war. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, saying India's G20 summit is a guiding star. Meanwhile, Germany says it supports the territorial integrity of Ukraine because you called it a war, while saying that you uphold the resolutions passed in the UN Security Council and at the UNGA. But Russia and China were not named in the paragraph, and that's way it was a win-win for both sides. Is Bharat's foreign policy now, has it now taken shape? And now is India arriving at the table as the problem solver? I have Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, Vivek Wadhwa back with us, Sunil Alagh, good to see you, and also Sushant Sareen. Namaste, Jai Hind to all our guests. My first question to you, Ambassador Sajanhar, have we got our foreign policy? There are many experts who have said that till the time Bharat becomes the nation that everybody turns to solve their problems, till the time we become the problem solver rather than the problem, we will never become a superpower. We will never be seen as a Viksit nation or a superpower. Do you think we've been able to achieve that with this G20 summit?
Well, thank you very much, Anand, for having me on your show. And yes, to respond to your question briefly, yes, India has really emerged as a consensus builder. India has emerged as a consensus maker. You know, I draw your attention also, Anand, to last year, November 2022, when in Bali also we were, faced with a similar problem of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and how to, how to reflect it as far as the final declaration is concerned. Because like in India, in the ministerial declarations, we were not able to get consensus. So also in Bali, and there also, it was the formulation of Prime Minister Modi that he had used with President Putin in Samarkand in September 22, which really won the day. that this is not an era of war. And that is how that formulation and that declaration got unanimous acceptance. Here, of course, the problem was much bigger, much more serious, because in December itself, Russia and supported by China had said that Bali will no longer fly. So we had to find out some alternatives, and the whole world was saying that India will not be able to do it because, the positions of both the sides were very, very definite and they were far apart. When European Union came here, the British UK PM came here, or Sergei Lavrov, their positions were very, very far. But I think we have been able to do it, and we were able to do it not at the 11th hour. We were able to do it very well in time. So I think this is truly a humongous historic achievement. I think it is truly a watershed moment in international relations, and I think it is really signifies coming of age of India as far as the global stage is concerned.
Amitabh Kant, the G20 Sherpa, was speaking with us here on the Right Stand on Sunday night, and he said that the emerging nations helped. Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, their leaders came and they really, really helped him get the other nations on board, especially Russia and China on board, to try and get this paragraph going and to get the entire document in place. So very clearly, even at the platform, at the presidency briefing, the Foreign Minister Jaishankar also credited the emerging nations. But if we look at the shape of the G20 now, post the inclusion of the Africa Union, Sunil Alagh, what stands out is that G20 now becomes more potent than the UN, more productive than the UN, and more inclusive, because we have nations of the future that will drive the growth in the future, now integral part of this construct.
United Nations, UN, before you finish speaking, UN had already, over the last 3 or 4 years, it became a mouthpiece for America. Basically, because even when they went into Iraq, when they went into everywhere, United Nations didn't use its speak. Didn't use its speak at all on this subject. See, we have spoken and Africa has come in. See, Europe is declining because of various problems, whether it's Germany, whether it's France, whether it's Italy. They, in the next 5 years, are seeing themselves come down. Now, UK, you've got Rishi Sunak, who has attempted to get into Bangladesh and whatever else. He's down on his feet. He's behaving like an Indian in India. And therefore, he's got a whole lot of problems coming up now. India is the best position to take advantage of where we are. And whether economically or not, it's going to help us in attracting investment, which I'm presuming you will ask little later. But I'm just telling you that, look, we have positioned ourselves so well in the world that today we have to now
Vivek ji, I'll come to you, sir.
Of the fact.
After Sunil Alagh, I'll come to you, Vivek ji. Sunil Alagh is also speaking, so let him complete and then I'll come to you, Vivek ji.
No, but I've just said that, look, we have positioned ourselves well. It's for us to take advantage of it now.
Well said. Yes, Vivek Vadva ji.
I thought there was a problem, that's why I stepped in. So what I was saying was that I'm moving a lot of my big projects over to India, everything from curing cancer to transforming agriculture, now to building medical diagnostics technology, all in India. And that's the same mindset here in Silicon Valley, that they're now looking at India as a source of talent, as a place where they can build future technologies, and as a country that's open to innovation. Those are the messages that have come across over here. So it's a wonderful time for India.
But tell me, what has changed in the last 1 year that was not there over the last decade or so, Vivek ji? Was it purely perception? Was it purely that the delegates have come? Or is it that they are now seeing India climb the ladder as far as growing economies is concerned?
And frankly, when Modi came to power, the media tide turned against him, because you have a bunch of extreme leftists just poisoning the media. So it was all negative publicity. No matter what the news about India was, they would throw in there about Hindu nationalism and Gujarat, and that's all that would be covered in the media. Now they have to get beyond that. So everyone's heard it 1,000 times already. So now the media is suddenly looking at India's achievements. The lunar lander probably did more for India than anything else in recent time, because suddenly India is at par with the most advanced nations. So all positive. And now G20, India being a passive country which is able to bring different countries together, do what everyone thought was impossible. This poor country now uniting the world, all positive. So again, you have all the positive trends, and then the implosion of China, because you had China, it was used to be China is going to rule the world. Suddenly now people fear China is going to destroy the world. So all of these forces have happened at the same time. So this is why I keep saying it's India's moment.
So it all has to come true. And it has to come good at the right time. Sushant Sareen, I'm sure you've perused the Delhi Declaration. What do you think is our takeaway? Do you think we've actually pulled off a foreign policy masterstroke here?
Anand, quite clearly, I think it's a huge success for Indian diplomacy and Indian leadership that you came up with a consensus document, and not just a consensus document on a couple of issues, on some very, very significant issues, which have to do with global economics, which have to do with globalization. But look, I'm like my other colleagues on the panel, I've always been bullish on India, right? I belong to a generation whose my first living memory is a resounding victory which we had in 1971. Okay. So I am not taken in by most of those people who've suffered, who carry a baggage of colonialism. So I'm from that generation, and the new generations are even more bullish than what I am. Okay, you have people in India who consider themselves to be world beaters. You just look at our cricket team. There was a time in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Supposing the top 2 or 3 people had gotten out, you could be rest assured that the whole team is going to go. Right? Today you fight till the last man, and you fight to win. So there is an attitudinal change which has come in India now. So I'm as bullish as all the others on the panel. But here is the thing, we have this uncanny ability of shooting ourselves in the foot. There have been times in the recent past, I would say in the last 20, 30 years, where we've been at a takeoff stage and then we've blown it. So I am keeping fingers crossed that we don't blow it this time. And as Mr. Wadhwa was saying, everything seems to be going in our favor. The reforms, and frankly, I'll be very honest, I was a little skeptical about the kind of reforms Mr. Modi was bringing in from 2014 onwards. But 9 years down the line, we are seeing those reforms actually work on the ground. Whether it is on corporate governance, whether it is on fiscal responsibility. Unlike the West, we were extremely responsible during the COVID period, right? So we don't have the kind of problems which many of the developed countries had. So we stayed within ourselves. So those reforms are now have led us to a point where we are all set to take off. Number 2, on the diplomatic plane, the kind of engagements this government has gone in for, especially in the Middle East, and we've seen the fruits of that in that declaration which happened yesterday. We've seen that. So there is everything which is going in our favor, and like Mr. Wadhwa said, the Chinese are shooting themselves in the foot, and I hope Xi Jinping stays in China as the leader of China for the foreseeable future, because he is doing more damage to the Chinese than anybody else have done. All those visionary leaders in China who preceded him, he has blown it. And I wish him a very long life and a long tenure as the president of China. So that is also working in our favor. The world has woken up to the danger that China poses, the kind of predatory policies they have practiced. The developed world, the developing world has also woken up to it. That all those nice, fancy white elephant projects are not working for them. Please name one country which has got a BRI project which is happening. They are all saddled with these projects which don't lead to anything productive, don't lead to any economic activity. All that they've done is they've indebted them to the Chinese. Okay, so this is a very neo-colonial or a colonialism with Chinese characteristics.
I'll come to China in just a bit, Sushantji. I just want to go back to Ambassador Sajjanar and look at 2-3 aspects of foreign policy which the pictures speak 1,000 words. One is the hug that, Azali Assoumani gave the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister leading him to that chair. Now, is this going to really rattle and perhaps also make the Africa Union, 55 countries, listen and look at it and say, maybe some nation has given us money and then got us into a debt trap, but the nation that's got us respect, the nation that has got us credibility and attention and the place at the table is India. So we've got to remember that. That's one. Second, the selfie that Joe Biden and Sheikh Hasina took together, that's a big win, sir, because the equations were quite frosty between Bangladesh and the White House under the Biden administration. The third one, he called him a pariah, but then he walked up to him to shake hands with Prime Minister in between. Joe Biden and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. That's the third big photograph that you'd see. And that biofuel alliance where everybody is standing together and also nations who are actually opposing it in the first place. 19 nations already on board. So some very significant victories on the sidelines too.
Yes, Anand, I quite tend to agree with you. I think it's been day 9th of September. I think will be remembered in the annals of Indian diplomacy. It's been a very significant day. You know, it's been mentioned that, and I tend to agree with you, more intricate than in anything else, that we are well known to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I think in this case, we have snatched victory from the jaws of defeat because everyone had said that it is impossible for India to do it. Also, I think, we have proved the reversal of the Murphy law, which says that, anything that has to go wrong will go wrong. And I think here, anything that had to go right went right. Whether it was the, the membership of the African Union, or it was the consensus in the debate, or it was the connectivity project, or what have you. Now, coming to your African aspect, it's a big achievement. It's a big move forward. But Africa is not a united place. There are 54 countries. Many of them are at loggerheads with each other. So, this we have handed it to them. Okay, we made it to them. And of course, there will be that sense of gratitude, etc., etc. But let me tell you, gratitude does not pay as far as international relations are concerned. You cannot build your policy on the basis of gratitude. And, I don't want to go into examples. I'm sure you and the other panelists, they are very well aware of what happens. So on gratitude, you don't build it. You build it on the basis of bilateral relations. And India has been working on that. The point is that I think today, just a few years ago, we decided to open 18 new embassies in Africa.
Yes, we did.
That's a huge deal. And you look at the number of visits, whether it is the president, the prime minister, the vice president, the external affairs minister, the number of visits that they have been taking place to Africa. And, in 2015, we had the Africa Forum in which we invited all 54 of them. And I think about 42, 43 of them came at the level of the prime minister and president. We need to do that Africa Forum all over again. So the point I'm making is that we need to keep ourselves engaged with Africa. Just the fact that, we have given the membership of the African Union to this, and it is a rotating presidency.
Right.
Today it is Comoros, tomorrow it's going to be someone else, day after tomorrow it's going to be someone else. So that gratitude is not going to work on that. The second point that you made was on Sheikh Hasina, the selfie. And I agree with you. I think that is something that is big, that is huge. And I think India and the United States need to be on the same page as far as Bangladesh is concerned. Normally the United States takes the cue from us as far as our neighboring countries are concerned. That needs to be, brought in as far as Bangladesh also is concerned. The last thing that you mentioned about MBS, and MBS, you would have seen, walked up to Joe Biden when President Biden was speaking to Prime Minister. You see, after calling him a pariah, you would recall that Joe Biden had also gone to Saudi Arabia. They did that fist bump, basically because he wanted him to increase oil production. But it has, and that's the last point that I'm going to make. And, MBS did not listen to what Joe Biden asked him to increase the production so that the prices could be kept under control. But right now, and everyone was writing the obituary of the United States as far as Middle East or West Asia is concerned.
Correct.
But not any longer. What I would say is that this Middle East corridor that we have signed, it is less of an economic corridor and it is more of a geostrategic move by India. And that is what we need to realize. It is not against the BRI.
Yes.
It is against the growing influence and footprint of China. It's $400 billion deal with Iran. It's increasing economic footprint in the GCC and in the Gulf.
It's also got big investments in Saudi Arabia also, sir.
Absolutely. During the visit of Xi Jinping.
We'll talk about China in just a bit. I just want to bring in Sunil Alagh and Vivek Wadhwaji for quick comments. Sunil Alagh, for you, what was perhaps the highlight here? If you were to look at the declaration, would you look at the World Biofuel Alliance? Would you look at the fact that the Jaipur call to action was to try and include more MSMEs?
As far as the foreign policy is concerned, which has been discussed for about the last 15 minutes, we've scored. And that's not enough, because as far as I'm concerned, the economic policy stands very much internal first. Modi has to score internally on inflation and on unemployment. See, we are a country of entrepreneurs, and therefore each one of these famous Indian companies, those who are not entrepreneurs, must create an environment of entrepreneurs. We must create where we do not expect people to stay forever. And therefore, infrastructure, which the capex has taken place, and India is happening, and Bharat is happening right now. But as far as I'm concerned, look, economically, it's enough to do a foreign policy, but domestically, we must attract investment. Indian investors must come in. And we are a country which tackles inflation and unemployment together. And that's what is more important than just discussing G20 on the policy, foreign policy. See, African nations, they are, whether we get them together or not, whether the presidency now goes to Brazil, whenever Mr. Modi goes across, even as a member with Brazil, he will make a point. And he's bound to make points. And therefore, everybody is now in a position to listen. But as we have to remain. And look, China today may be down in the dumps, but do not assume that they'll remain down in the dumps.
Yeah,
so therefore, we have to be ready for competition, and which we are. We are best positioned, and therefore we have to make the most of it. Economically, outside policy, every single thing has to be made together, assuming that competition will not remain where it is.
No, you make a fair point, but internally also for India from this G20, there are a lot of takeaways. Why do you think? Let me just bring in Vivek Wadhwaji also. Vivek Wadhwaji, would you agree with Sunil Alagh where he says that internally investors need to invest, they need to loosen their purses? Corporate India has to now buy the entire story, the India growth story. So far, there has been a little bit of a reluctance.
Yes, absolutely. India has to have confidence in itself. We need India investing a lot more. We need a lot more startups. We need a lot more energy, a lot more confidence. Because one of the biggest problems I've seen with India is that it has had an inferiority complex, that it doesn't believe in itself. Well, now it should believe in itself because it's shown the world what it can do in terms of technology, in terms of innovation, and now in terms of bringing the world together in a very positive way. So yes, India has to invest in itself. And the more it does that, the more foreign capital it'll draw. Because right now the world is looking for an alternative to China. All the money that's not going to China, that's coming out of China, they want to invest it somewhere. So India has to be that place, and it can be that place.
Final word with Sunil Alagh and Vivek Wadhwa. Just another 2 minutes. I have to move on to the China part of the conversation. But Sunil Alagh, what is the one big thing that the government now needs to do to get the G20 benefits accrue to India economically? Sunil Alagh.
See, economically, we have to sideline China, and China is not going to be sidelined easily. They have lent a lot of money to a lot of countries already, to Sri Lanka, to Bangladesh, to African nations, and they've signed contracts. Now, unless they shoot themselves in the feet, what we have to do is to gather people around us now. And that's what's more important, because Mr. Modi is quite capable of doing it. Let me tell you one thing, we've got a Prime Minister today who is more action oriented than anyone that we've seen in the last, I don't know how many years. But look, we have to keep in mind internal economic growth as well as external. The China has to be controlled in that area, whether Malaysia does it or Indonesia does it or Philippines does it. We have to gather everybody around us to control China. India alone cannot control China because China is too huge militarily as well as economically today. And therefore, we need to do and we gather support for ourselves. And that's what Mr. Modi is quite capable of doing.
Well, to our east and our west, we are making friends. And Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at this point is there at Rashtrapati Bhavan for the state dinner that's been accorded to him. He's on a state visit that concludes now. We've got the live pictures. Vivek ji, one big policy change that you think the government still needs to make to maximize the benefits?
The government needs to do soft diplomacy in terms of technology now, sharing all of the development. It's had everything from UPI to other platforms and technologies. It has to start doing it. That's the way India can provide value to the world, to share its knowledge with the world.
Vivek ji and Sunil ji, thank you very, very much. The conversation now, we take this forward with Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, Sushant Sareen, and we'll also have Professor Victor Gao joining us very soon. The question, Sushant Sareen, with the China question. Let's try and understand the China question a little bit. How is the economic corridor and the engagements now that we have, how is it going to impact and influence China? And China will be watching because China agreed to sign or agreed to the construct of the paragraphs vis-a-vis the Ukraine war because Russia was on board. But China will be looking, or do you believe that China is now increasingly going to move away from any multilateral platform that includes the West? It's going to engage in BRICS, SCO, and create its own, perhaps, grouping.
No, I don't think that the Chinese will go that far. I think there will be problems between the West and China. There is a pushback taking place. But I don't think the Chinese are just going to, roll over and play dead and say that, okay, fine, we are going out of these groupings and we are going to form our own grouping. They will form some of their own groupings. SCO, for example, a couple of others maybe. They are doubling down on BRICS for whatever BRICS is worth, and they're trying to expand it. There are something like 20-25 countries which are waiting in queue to join BRICS. Although what they're going to do, I don't know. But I don't see China walking out of G20 or any of the other forums. Number one. Number two, as far as this particular economic corridor is concerned, look, I think it's a fabulous, it's not just a geostrategic initiative. That is, of course, there. There is an element of geopolitics behind it, but I think in terms of economic viability, it's huge. Okay, and I'll tell you why I say this. Look, this is a corridor between India, Middle East, and Europe. India is at $3.7 trillion today. In another 10 years, we are probably looking at 7 trillion, maybe 7.5 trillion, maybe more. Okay, it depends on the rate at which we grow. But we are about to reach there, which means that our trade, which is almost 40% of our GDP right now, is also going to go by leaps and bounds. We are already doing trade of over nearly $160 billion with the Middle East. My numbers might be a little dodgy, but a similar amount with Europe, and I'm not even taking the US into account right now. So you just add the numbers, or you just double this number over the next 10 years, by which I think this corridor should have operationalized. Now, all that you have right now is the Suez Canal. Once you form this corridor, you have an alternative to the Suez Canal. You bind a lot of pivotal countries in this corridor. There are stakes which develop in this. So the economic viability, the financial feasibility of this project is already there. It's not like CPEC that some strange kind of a road is coming. The Chinese don't know what a belt is, what a road is. A road is in the sea, the belt is on land. I don't know. Maybe challenged in English language and they come up with these crazy formulations, or maybe they think they'll be able to confuse the world by talking about belt and road on sea and land. I don't know what the Chinese do. But clearly the viability of this project is very much there. Okay. So, and when this project takes off, and this is not a project which is going to saddle the countries which are part of this particular corridor in any kind of a debt trap. There are massive spin-offs in terms of technologies, in terms of employment, in terms of opportunities for all the countries in along this corridor and sitting astride this corridor. There'll be other countries which can become, have spurs leading into this corridor and become part of it. I think, look at it from that point of view, it stands out as a kind of a very, very viable alternative and a very doable thing.
See, let's just expand on this a little bit, Sushantji, along with Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, where he said that don't look at it as an economic corridor, look at it as a geostrategic masterstroke that's happened. Why? Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, you can
look at it as both.
Look at it as both. See, UAE, that means the 7 Emirates, and also Saudi Arabia, Jordan, they're all cash-rich nations. They have enough money. America has got its money, France has got its money, India is at zero cost, it's a port, rail, road connection, and you're building it. But then there are implications in the OIC. There is a counter to China's increased presence, like you said, in Iran, the $100 billion, the Gwadar port, Chabahar port, all of these also come into play. Ambassador Ashok Sajanar, as we say good evening to Professor Victor Gao. So more than competition to BRI, it's perhaps helping certain geostrategic alignments in this region. Ambassador Ashok Sajanar.
Yes, absolutely, Anand. And, I don't want to take it only as a competition to the BRI because, BRI is having its own problems, although, the 10 years of BRI, China might be celebrating it, and you will see about, maybe more than 100 countries coming there, and China will tom-tom it as a great success of the BRI. But all of us know that BRI is losing steam, like the Chinese economy is losing steam. I'm not saying that China's economy is going anywhere in such a great hurry, but what we used to know as the Chinese miracle, I think that is behind us, and we need to be clear about that. So here, as far what I'm talking about really is not as a competition only to BRI, but it is an economic, a very significant, viable, economically viable, climatically sustainable project, but also has huge geostrategic ramifications. So one should not be sort of, just looking at it only as an economic project, which is, in a manner of speaking, challenging BRI. No, not at all. I think it is China's footprint there is growing in a very significant manner. We have seen over the last few years that it is coming through. And that is something that it will challenge. It was said that the United States has withdrawn itself from the Middle East because, it no longer needs energy. It has enough of energy. In fact, it has become an exporter of oil. So it doesn't need to sort of, pay so much of attention. I think the fact that America is coming back along with Saudi Arabia, because, their relations had really become very fraught, become very tense. So America is coming back with Saudi Arabia along with Israel. So, this rapport between Israel and UAE was already there, but Israel and Saudi Arabia also coming together. I think that is so many new equations that are coming up, and India being a part of it. I think that is what really makes it very exciting. Anand.
Well, let me ask Professor Victor Gao, how would you read the Delhi Declaration, the economic corridor? Professor Victor Gao, what is China's position? There are talks where China is perhaps going to look at charting its own course, wean itself away from some of these multilateral platforms that are dominated by the West. Is that true, Professor Victor Gao?
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, allow me to congratulate the successful holding of the G20 summit in New Delhi, and I congratulate the Indian government, the Indian people, and Prime Minister Modi for really doing an excellent job in setting off one of the most successful G20 summits. Talking about the economic corridor, allow me to emphasize, if the economic corridor announced at the summit will be a success. I will be the first to congratulate it. Because from the Chinese perspective, if you are building connectivity projects, the more connectivity projects, the better. It will reinforce each other. So I don't see any conflicts between this economic corridor project versus the BRI initiative, which is supported by more than 100 countries, for example. If you are serious about building connectivity, the more connectivity projects, the better. Now, thirdly, when you talk about building a big railway project linking India to Middle East to Europe, I would say, first of all, India, according to my best judgment, really need to get its own railway projects at home, really brushed up and upgraded. When was the time when the United States built its railway? It's at the end of the 19th century, and they haven't built any major railway for more than 100 years. And you constantly hear about horror stories about rolling over of the railways in the United States, and they travel at snail speed compared with the high-speed railway projects in China, which is the longest mileage you can even think about. Therefore, I think you need to really do your homework better rather than just talk about it. You need to do it in concrete terms. Thirdly, for the economic corridor to really take off, India and Pakistan need to improve their relations significantly, because Pakistan is in between what's being announced from India to the Middle East, etc. So there are lots of heavy lifting that you need to work out. And once you have an idea, it's great. How to get the idea really take off, it takes a lot of serious thinking. And when the United States talks about coming back, etc., they never left. Further, whenever the United States is talking about funding the project, you have to have second guess, because they really haven't really come up with any significant money supporting any major projects except military spending. That's for sure. So my advice to our friends and brothers and sisters in India is listen very carefully when Washington talks about funding or supporting the funding of the project. And you may say, well, Saudi Arabia, etc. I will bet with you, Saudi Arabia will be the last Arab country to recognize Israel. They will not take any risk in recognizing Israel, because they want to remain the fierce defender of Islam, the two holiest mosques in the Middle East, etc. So any fantasy about imminent improvement of Israeli-Saudi Arabia relations probably is overblown. So my advice, again, be realistic, and if it is successful, I will be the first to congratulate. And hopefully the BI projects in many countries will intersect with this economic corridor project, and all of us will win, because connectivity projects reinforce each other rather than defeat each other.
Victor Gao had a lot of points to say it's not going to fly. That's his first thing geopolitically. But it's not just rail, it's ports, it's rail, it's road, it's a combination of all of this, and nations will have to come together. More importantly, the intent was clear, because 3 or 4 nations said how long and how soon are we going to get it started? When are we getting action on it? And that seemed to be the intent. Sushant Sareen, quick word, and we'll bring in Puneet Sani, because then we'll also traverse the one path that we've not spoken of yet, Canada and Justin Trudeau. But Sushant Sareen first, yes.
Anand, I think it's very important to challenge some of the stuff which Professor Gao has said. Number one, I think it's rich coming from the Chinese that India should make up with Pakistan. Not that any connectivity is happening through Pakistan. We are going through the sea. The Chinese, however, are violating our territorial sovereignty by coming and building that CPEC project of theirs, which has not really taken off. It has nothing to show for it, and it's a logistical nightmare. It's going to be a failure. It's very clear, but it was done for geostrategic reasons. They wanted a port. They're probably going to get it from the Pakistanis. But even if you accept that the CPEC was going to work, the Chinese would have come from the using a land route, come to a port, and then use the sea route to go and access other markets. It was not that the corridor was only between China and Pakistan, right? It was to get access to other markets. Now, if we use the sea route first, and then the land route, and then again a sea route, then this corridor is not viable. But the Chinese use a route through the most difficult mountainous terrain in the world at 15,000, 16,000 feet, mountains which are very weak, which can collapse anytime. And there is no railway line out there. It's only a road project coming. There's no pipeline out there. That is viable. But what we are building is not viable. So I don't know how that works. Number one. Number two, I don't see how the Pakistanis get involved in this project. Number three, on the financing part of it and the technology part of it. I'm sure Professor Gao knows that the Japanese are also part of this project. It's not just the Americans, but it's the Japanese. 5 of the G7 countries are part of it. Those 5 countries have fabulous technology as far as railways is concerned, including France. India has a lot of capacity and capability in building freight trains, right? And we are doing that right now. We have the capacity and capability of building modern railway lines, which we are doing right now. Okay. We build what we build in India according to our requirements. We don't build ghost projects. Ghost projects nobody is going to use and which are going to lose money, as much of these Chinese projects are losing both in China, outside China. So technologically and financially, this is an eminently viable scheme, much more viable than the money which the Chinese have been sinking in the BRI project. And let's just wait and see how many of those countries go and attend the BRI conference, because what happened in the last big conference which they attended when they were announcing BRI with great fanfare, I think a lot of countries have, that romance with this BRI project has ended. A lot of countries have woken up to the implications of what the Chinese have been doing, because it is their material, their people, their money, everything they put, they take all the benefit, and the country in which the project is built is left with this white elephant of a project which nobody has any use.
I think we have seen many more examples of that in the neighborhood. I have to, yes, Professor Victor Gao, quick response, and then I'll go across to Puneet Sahni and we'll move the story forward. Yes, Professor Victor Gao.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me another chance. First of all, I started by saying if this economic corridor project really takes off and is a great success, I will be the first to congratulate all parties participating in this. That's the first point. Secondly, the distinguished Indian panelists talked about the BRI. Allow me to emphasize, if you talk to the Indonesians, they just celebrated the official launch of the fast-speed train between Jakarta and Bandung, and it will be further extended in both directions. If you talk to the Kenyans, they talk about the huge fast-speed train projects in Kenya, linking the inland cities to the coast. If you talk to the Ethiopians, holy cow, they've built highways, many other projects, etc. So, and if you talk to the Laos is landlocked, but then there is a railway connectivity already built, and it's the first kind of a fast-speed train in central.
Who owns the trains? Who owns the trains? Who collects the revenues?
You need to see everything.
And how many of these nations are financially healthy or are not caught in a debt trap with the CCP? These will be questions. This is a long conversation, so we'll have to park it for another day, gentlemen.
Allow me to answer that.
We'll have to park it for another day, gentlemen, because I have another gentleman who's joined us specifically for an important issue. One of the nations that was not just sidelined but was also told off very significantly. Ambassador Ashok Sajjan and Professor Victor Gao, thank you very much. Sushant Sareen and Puneet Sahni, stay with us. Justin Trudeau has been told off in no uncertain terms, but he has tried to be quite standoffish and even brazen it out when he addressed the press conference. Ironically, Puneet Sahni and Sushant Sareen, had his plane taken off, soon as it took off, there would have been that referendum activity in Surrey. It's perhaps fate that he is still in Delhi while we show proof to the world of what was allowed in Surrey under the garb of freedom of expression. Puneet Sahni?
Right. So, namaste, Anand. Thank you for inviting me. I think, we just need to catch Canada on specifics. So, again, they have a weasel room that we have freedom of speech. For example, when they take out the tableau of Mrs. Gandhi, I put out yesterday. So, what they are publishing from that Gurdwara in a yearly special is, so this person we are celebrating, he went to India, he murdered somebody, he came back to Canada. Then he went back to India again and again murdered somebody and came back to Canada. And again went to India and again did killings. And these people are celebrated. So, this is not by any stretch of imagination, any freedom of speech or anything. we have to get them on specifics. Like this is terrorism, and Anand, I'm sorry to take today is actually 11th September. This is the day of 9/11, and the greatest act of aviation terror before 9/11 was this bombing of Air India by Khalistanis. And this should be the biggest, issue in Canadian history, because nothing like this happened on Canadian. Recently, there was a survey the kids don't know. Like for example, this Trudeau, what you're saying. I think what is even more disgraceful is on the day of the bombing Air India, Trudeau did not even go to the memorial. And when they talk, they are so terrified of the Khalistanis, they talk like some natural calamity or flood has happened. Like we expressed displeasure. Oh my, who has done it? The Babbar Khalsa and the Khalistanis, and they are still venerated in the Gurdwaras. They never pass a, a statement on that. So I think, these people are shameless. Like he has no shame, he has been disgraced, and I'm thankful to the government who finally took a strong line on him.
Right.
But we have to, what we can do is also make the case to this Canadian people. Like what kind of people you are celebrating. For example, every inquiry commission says Talvinder Parmar is the mastermind and instigator of the bombing, which has killed, people. And they don't even go to the memorial. When they talk about it, they don't even take the name of the Babbar Khalsa or the, this Talvinder Parmar who has done it. And these people are rising, and they will kill Canadians again. So I think that is the case we should be making.
Fair point.
Rather than hoping that Trudeau would have some shame. He's a shameless person.
Fair point, Sushantji. Puneet, please stay with me. I'm compelled to take a break. It's a 4-minute commercial break, and when we come back, we pick up the conversation. Stay with us.